So today I asked the question, should you test your pastor or your preacher or whatever you call them to see if they are truthful and in the correct doctrine or not? Should you test them? If you were to ask these preachers, I dare say they would become defensive and would not want you to do such a thing. But let us go to Revelation 2. And you will see that this kind of examination of the so-called people in charge of religious things, it's required and necessary. Where it's the fact that it's necessary is implied in Revelation 2. To start in verse 1, unto the angel of the church of Ephesus write, these things says he that holds the 7 stars in his right hand, who walks in the midst of the 7 golden candlesticks, or lampstands. I know your works and your labor and your patience, and you. This is the first thing Yeshua mentions that he likes about the people of the church of Ephesus. You cannot bear them which are evil, and you have tried them which say that they are sent forth. That's right. Anyone who claims to be a preacher sent forth claims that's the description of apostle. But they are not. And you have found them to be liars. And of course, when somebody like me comes up and say, hey, you're speaking falsehood and untruth, they deem you the one who tests the false apostles. They deem them as a heretic and as one who sows discord. This is what they do. Now, so this is one of the positives that Yeshua found in the church of Ephesus, how they tested the false apostles and found them to be liars. So, you have that ability and responsibility, and I will help you do this with a clear conscience using the Bible. Now, there are several ways, but one in particular is the best way of them all and cuts through all. I will start with one in particular that I like. It's in Matthew 23, I believe. Verse 9. And so, Yeshua, he tells those who are following him not to be like the scribes and the Pharisees. What the scribes and Pharisees do? Well, the same thing that many preachers do to this day. So, in verse 1, he's telling the people to follow the rules, but don't act like the scribes and the Pharisees, because they say, but they do not. Verse 4, for they bind up heavy burdens, grievous to be carried, and lay them on men's shoulders, but they themselves will not move one little finger to help. But all their works they do to be seen of men. They make broad their phylacteries. Now, preachers don't use phylacteries today, but they do other things with their clothing to make them stand out as a holy man, and enlarge the borders of their garments. And they love the uppermost rooms at feasts and the chief seats in the synagogues. It doesn't take a genius for you to decipher that in your own life among the preachers you know. And greetings in the markets, love to be called of men, Rabbi, Rabbi. Now, or Reverend, Reverend, which you're not supposed to say to a man, or Father, which you're not supposed to say to a man other than the one who is your father. Verse 8, but don't be called Rabbi, for one is your master, even Messiah, and the rest of you are all brethren, which means no one is over the other. And call no man your father upon the earth, for one is your Father which is in heaven. Be you not called masters, for one is your master, even Messiah. But he that is greatest among you shall be your servant, and whosoever shall exalt himself shall be abased, and he that shall humble himself shall be exalted. Now, you would think that would be enough, but no. Preachers always find a way to get around that and to still impose their will upon you. So we see several ways in this one particular chapter to root out and to expose the false preacher. Paul talked about these people as well and how to deal with them. Now, these preachers, they want to take your money and collect, as they say, tithes. Now, tithes was supposed to go to the temple in Jerusalem. It was supposed to go to the Levites. And, well, anyway, I mentioned in Hebrews, several instances, the Levitical priesthood was replaced with a greater priesthood. That greater priesthood does not collect tithes, because even the tribe of Levi paid tithes to the greater priesthood, the priesthood after the order of Melchizedek, while he was yet in the loins of Abraham. So, if a preacher tries to use a Levitical clause of sorts to try to collect your money, we are not supporting a Levitical priesthood anymore. The priesthood is after the order of Melchizedek. And of course, that priesthood does not need your money because he has everlasting life. Now, Paul, in 2 Thessalonians 3, starting in verse 6, he's speaking to everybody, since they are all brethren, all brothers, all equal. This applies to everyone, including those who think that they are special. Verse 6, we now command you, brethren, in the name of our Master, Yeshua, Messiah, that you withdraw yourselves from every brother. That, yes, brethren, you're all brethren. And Yeshua said that to the disciples. That means Paul was including himself in this equation. That you withdraw yourself from every brother that walks disorderly and not after the tradition which he received from us, or not after the example he received from us. Us is who? Paul and Barnabas, I believe it was. But he's speaking to Timothy. And Timothy was in this equation, I should say. For you yourselves know how you ought to follow us. For we, notice he uses himself as an example, did not behave ourselves disorderly among you, neither did we eat any man's bread for nothing, but wrought with labor and travail night and day, worked night and day, so that they would not owe or be chargeable to any of those people. Not because we don't have authority, but to make ourselves an example unto you, to follow us. For we, even when we were with you, this we commanded you, that if any man would not work, neither should he eat. For we hear that there are some who are walking among you disorderly, working not at all, but are busybodies. Now these preachers, they claim that they are working by that's not working. He's talking about making a living. That kind of working. And those people who do not work for a living are busybodies. Now, them that are busybodies, we command and exhort by our Master Yeshua Messiah that they shut up and work. That's right. It says with quietness, same thing. Shut up and work for a living. And eat your own bread, not somebody else's bread. But you, brethren, don't be weary in well-doing. And if any man obey not our word by this epistles, note that man and have no company with him, that he may be ashamed. So there you have it, folks. So you have been given the tool and the authority to tell any so-called preacher where to go if they do not follow the rules that Paul laid out concerning taking other people's money. And you can take a look around you. You see all these guys living in the lap of luxury, taking money from their followers. Yeshua, Messiah, said about the Pharisees getting honor among men, he said they have their reward. Don't you think that the same thing goes for these preachers who go and collect all this money for themselves, who feed off the flock, just like it's written in Ezekiel. Now, to me, the most important factor, the most important way to be able to discern whether your preacher stands in the truth, maybe I should use a little bit stronger language here. Maybe I should say, here's a way to find out if your preacher stands with Jehovah and the Messiah, or if he stands with the adversary or the devil. This one will make a lot of people angry because much of Christianity today is on the wrong side. And the truth can be found in several different locations, all in the New Testament. And of course, I always go back to Romans 11. This one never fails. So, here's what I'm saying. What you should do is you should question your preacher. Yes, you should question your preacher. Revelation 2 implies that. And you have that as backup in case he starts questioning you for questioning him. You've got that. You've got Revelation 2, where it talks about how the Ephesian, yes, I believe it was church in Ephesus, the Ephesians would test people to see if they were apostles or not, and would find them to be liars. So they had a way of doing that. So you should too. And here's my favorite one. My favorite one is this. Ask your preacher if Israel, the nation of Israel, will be brought back into the fold, or if the church replaces Israel. If he chooses answer number 1, then he is doctrinally sound concerning the gospel. If, however, he chooses answer number 2, he stands with the devil. Plain and simple. Romans 11, verse 1. I say, then, hath Jehovah cast away his people? Jehovah forbid, for I also am an Israelite of the seed of Abraham, of the tribe of Benjamin. He has not cast away his people which he foreknew. Don't you know what the scripture says about Eliyahu? How he made intercession to Jehovah against Israel, saying, Master, they have killed your prophets and digged down your altars, and I am left alone. They seek my life. But what did he say to Eliyahu? I have reserved to myself 7,000 men who have not bowed the knee to the image. Image? Yes, image of Baal. The image of Baal is also in every house of worship of Christians today, or nearly every house of worship of Christians today. That's another way to know whether your preacher stands with the truth or not. Even so, then at this present time, there is also a remnant according to the election of grace. So what is he saying? He's saying to Israel at this time, even though Israel eyes have been temporarily blinded, there is still a number who come in by grace, by the election of grace. And if by grace there is no more of works, otherwise grace is no more grace. What he's pointing out here is these particular Israelites that come in by grace, they don't have to go to the temple 3 times a year. They don't have to do all these ritual sacrifices and so on and so forth. Verse 7, what then? Israel has, the nation of Israel has not yet obtained what it seeks, but the election has obtained it, and the rest were blinded. Okay. And it goes on about in Psalms how David explained it. Verse 11, I say then, have they stumbled that they should fall? Jehovah forbid, but rather through their fall, salvation has come to the Gentiles to provoke them to jealousy. Now, if the fall of Israel be the riches of the Gentiles, and the diminishing of Israel the riches of the Gentiles, how much more shall the fullness of Israel be? Even greater than the Gentiles. You see, this is what he's implying. But I speak to you Gentiles, as I am the apostle to the Gentiles. I magnify my office, if by any means I may provoke to emulation to them which are of my flesh Israel, and might save some of them. But for if the casting away of them be the reconciling of the world, what shall the receiving of them be but life from the dead? There's a promise of bringing Israel back, literally and figuratively, from the dead. Because if the first fruit, the Messiah, is holy, the lump is also holy. And if the root be holy, so are the 12 branches of Israel. And if some of the branches were broken off temporarily, being a wild olive tree, you were grafted among them, and now partake of the root and the fatness of the olive tree. Boast not against the branches. But if you boast, you bear not the root, but the root bears you. You will say then, the branches were broken off that I might be grafted in. Well, because of unbelief they were broken off, and you stand by faith. Be not high-minded, but fear. For if Jehovah spared not the natural branches, take heed that he also spare you not either. Behold, therefore, the goodness and the severity of Jehovah on them which fell severity, but toward you goodness, only if you continue in his goodness. Otherwise you will also be cut off. And they also, Israel also, if they no longer abide still in unbelief, shall be brought back in. You see, folks, this is what I am talking about. But the preacher will say, if. I always want to throw the if in there. And I will say this. And it says, how much more shall these be, or the Israel be, which be the natural branches, be grafted into their own olive tree? And then he follows it up with this. Verse 25, for I would not, brethren, that you should be ignorant of this mystery, lest you should be wise in your own conceits, that blindness in part is happened to Israel, until the fullness of the Gentiles be come in, or until Jehovah is finished converting the Gentiles. What happens after that? What happens when the 77s are finished, that I have talked over and over about? What happens is Isaiah 2 verses 18 through 22 happens. We'll continue in Romans 11 verse 26, and so all Israel shall be saved. Boy, that really gets some of these people's blood pressure going up. As it is written, there shall come out of Zion the deliverer, and shall turn away ungodliness from Jacob, for this is my covenant unto them, when I shall take away their sins. Now, what covenant is that? It's the new covenant. Hebrews 8. I think. Verse 7, for if the first covenant had been faultless, then should no place be sought for the second. For finding fault with them, he said, behold, the days come, saith Jehovah, when I will make a new covenant with spiritual Israel, if your preacher says spiritual Israel, then he is what is aptly described in Revelation 2 concerning those apostles who were found to be liars. New covenant with the house of Israel, that's the lost 10 tribes of Israel, and the house of Judah, which is Benjamin and Judah. Not according to the covenant that I made with their fathers in the day when I took them by the hand to lead them out of the land of Egypt, because they continued not in that covenant, and I regarded them not, saith Jehovah. For this is the covenant that I will make with the house of Israel in those days. What days? After the times of the Gentiles are fulfilled. After the 77s of Daniel 9 are finished. This is the covenant that I will make with the house of Israel in those days, saith Jehovah. I will put my laws in their mind and write them in their hearts, and I will be to them an Elohim, and they shall be to me a people. And they shall not teach every man his neighbor and every man his brother, saying, Know Jehovah, for they all will know me from the least to the greatest. For I will be merciful to their unrighteousness, and their sins and their iniquities will I remember no more. Let me ask you a question. Does your preacher teach this? If your preacher does not teach this, he is a liar. He stands with the adversary. And if the preachers in Europe taught this, if they taught what you just heard, what you just read in Hebrews 8, there would be no Holocaust ever happened in Europe. Nothing, none of it. But the reason anti-Semitism is so rampant in Europe is because their preachers, their leaders, have rejected the truth and stand with the adversaries. You can sit there and carry a cross and hold up your graven images all you want to. If you do not stand with sound doctrine, you and your preacher by default stand with the devil. And will act accordingly in the last days. So, you have been given the tools and the authority to test your preacher. And if your preacher resists you, you show him in Revelation 2, that you have the authority. Revelation 2 and verse 2. That should be easy to remember. Revelation 2 and verse 2 gives you the authority to test your preacher. And you have the authority to call him a liar if he does not follow the principles that you just read and you just heard. Now go do it.